once again to my studio. I am surrounded by zinnias right now. My garden is just overproducing, and I keep asking people to come and cut some and take bouquets home, because the more you cut, the more prolific they will be, and they're a lot healthier if you cut them. So we've had such a good time collaborating on flower paintings. Next week, I will show you how much fun we had last Friday when a whole bunch of us got together and just had a blast painting flowers. But today, I want to show you something that I really enjoy, and that is I like to take out music manuscript paper. I have been a pianist and violinist in past years. I don't play very much anymore, but I have some great old music, and so I pulled out some Chopin and I've painted a couple of paintings. Today I'm going to compare painting watercolor on the manuscript paper. One paper I have prepared with clear gesso, just to see if that tooth would really help my watercolors in some way or give it interesting properties that would be fun to work with. And on the other one, I'm painting pretty much the same painting on just the plain manuscript paper. I learned a lot. I was kind of surprised. So take a look and see what you think. Okay, I'm working directly right out of my Daniel Smith travel palette, and when I paint on any non-typical paper, I usually use pretty saturated color, which means that I don't use a lot of water, I use a lot of paint, and I usually wet the paints, reconstitute them a few minutes before I actually sit down and paint so that I have fresh paint. In this case, however, I'm working from actual paint that I've squirted out onto my palette. So this is very saturated paint that I've added just a little bit of water to. So I'm going to work back and forth. The paper on the left has been prepared in advance with clear gesso. It creates quite a tooth. It almost reminds me of sandpaper, and I was curious to know if it would allow my watercolors to go on. You know, I wanted to see if there would be any advantage to working this way. The paper, the manuscript paper almost makes me feel like I'm painting on hot press paper. So it's surprising that it doesn't sink in. Obviously this paper doesn't have any sizing that's been prepared for watercolorists, but the properties of the paper really do remarkably well in working with the paint. I mean, I've painted on watercolor on manuscript paper many times, and I'm always really quite surprised at how well it works. It's already starting out a bit yellowed. This paper is probably 50 or 60 years old, I would think. I studied piano in the 1970s, so I've had lots and lots of papers through the years, lots of books of music. I enjoy collaging with music as well. I've done a lot of that. I've done violin methods book covers. Years ago, I worked with a company and did collages, many of them out of this type of antique paper, antique manuscript paper. Someday I'll pull out some images and share with you some of those big paintings that I did. I have enjoyed doing flowers on music. I guess it ticks several boxes for me. I love flowers and I love music, so in this case, I combine them. I'm using a Chinese calligraphy brush. This is, it's, for me, it's a really nice tool to play with. I know that it's not a fine watercolor brush, but it's something that I'm able to scoop up quite a bit of paint because it has a little bit of stiffness to it. It has the ability to hold quite a lot of paint. It's a natural bristle. By the way, this type of paintbrush is very affordable. It's something that I've just gotten used to. It feels like an extension of my hand, so I can draw with it, which I'm doing here. I'm sort of illustrating a zinnia-like flower. I'm painting from memory here, so I've painted a lot of zinnias in my life, and as I said before, I'm trying to work back and forth so that I can compare the properties of these papers, the one on the left being prepared in advance with a clear gesso. The clear gesso allows the music to show through, and yet it provides a lot of tooth. You know, in doing this painting, I'm rather surprised that there's not much advantage to having the tooth. I like the one on the right without the tooth just as much. I don't always take the time to create a lot of petals. Usually I paint more abstractly than this, but I decided to add some petals and have a little bit more representational effects here. Certainly zinnias have a lot of little petals, and I wanted to give that effect today. These are very transparent paints. These are Daniel Smith colors, magenta and quinacridone red, pyrrole orange, I think. I've got some green gold going on. I was surprised there as I added the green gold. You can see up at the top of the long stem on the left, I was surprised that the gesso caused that green gold to spread, because I'm using a liner brush here, obviously, to make the lines of the stems. And you can see that that green gold spread out almost like it would have had the paper been wet, which it was not. So I'm blotting that a little bit so that it is a little bit less prominent. But I'm not pleased that that spread like that. I do not understand why it did that, because you know, it wasn't wet, so I wasn't doing wet onto wet. Um, Something about the property of that gesso made it do that. So I went back in once I had dried it off and tried to create a little bit more stem shape. Now I'm using a sort of a moppy brush so that I could get some leaf shapes in rather quickly. I'm going to mention to you as you watch this, in my tools segment, I'm going to consider this my tools segment today. Did you know that when you're watching a YouTube video, you can look at the bottom of the video for a little gear? There should be a little gear on the bottom right. Usually most screens have the gear on the bottom right. If you're using a different type of device, maybe an iPhone or a mobile device, it may be somewhere else. But look for a gear, and when you click on that gear, you can slow down a video or speed it up as you wish. So if you're ever watching one of my videos and you would like to paint along, you can slow it down if you wish. And because a lot of times, and in this case, I have sped up the video so that the viewer can watch and yet not have to watch the full length of the paint drying between marks. I don't think I would have any viewers left if I left it at 100% speed. You know, watercolors don't just fly by. You have to be mindful and build. And so this video is sped up double time, times 2. So if at some point you want to slow it down to paint along, by all means click that little gear button and slow it down to whatever speed you'd like. And if you would like to buzz through it and watch it real fast, you can do that as well. And of course, you can always click on the timeline and pause it if you want to. So there is your tool information for the day. We won't have a separate segment. It's mixed right into this video as you watch me paint these zinnias. So the original layer of paint is dry for the most part, and I'm going in and adding a few petals. I'm adding a bud up here just for a little bit of variety in my composition. I am delighted with the fact that you can do quite a bit of glazing, building up of color with this manuscript paper. Just like you would on watercolor paper. I expect for some people the music paper would be a distraction. Some people would prefer to have a painting be on a plain piece of paper. For some reason, and I can't explain why, but I get a, a kick out of pattern. I love pattern. When I buy clothing, a lot of times I tend to choose pieces of clothing that have a lot of pattern. So I kind of like this music manuscript, as you might have detected already. So I'm trying lifting. This is another thing that I always like to experiment with, whether I can lift, because that's a way that I can get a variety of values in my painting. And in both cases, with and without the gesso, I'm able to lift a little bit and blend. I'm blending here, moving some paint around. That's something that I always value when I'm painting watercolor. I like to be able to sort of sculpt and move paint around as I need to. So in both cases, the gessoed paper and the non-gessoed manuscript paper, I'm able to move paint and sculpt the leaves and lift the paint. One thing that really surprises me, even with the non-gessoed paper, I'm able to paint with quite a bit of water and or paint in my brush, and it doesn't soak through. You know, I recently participated in a collaborative painting with other artists, and we used essentially butcher paper, and it was pretty easy to have that butcher paper get soaked enough that it tore as people were drawing and painting on it. And this music paper does not do that. It's pretty tough. As you can see, I'm going in and I'm adding some detail with a Posca pen. This is acrylic, and I think it adds a nice little touch to the zinnias. So my watercolor had dried completely before I started with this Posca pen. I decided it would be fun to add a little yellow to the centers. Zinnias have these pretty yellow centers. I think that really added something special. I was glad to discover that. Mixed media is my cup of tea, I think. I I've been painting a long time, and I appreciate being able to just look around in my art supplies to see what tools will do the job that I need to have done. I don't really worry anymore about, oh, what kind of paint is this? What kind of binder, has put the pigments together? To me, it doesn't matter. It matters more. Does the tool take care of the job that I want to do? So I'm auditioning this to see what it would look like in a mat. I keep these test mats in my studio, and it's a nice way to see if I feel like a painting is done. And in this case, I could leave it here, um, but even though it's a lot more work to add some darks, I am mixing some carbazole violet with my deep sap green. I really like that combination. To me, that's just a very beautiful, believable neutral. And I decided to paint in the negative spaces so that my paintings have a little bit of weight at the bottom. I did learn in doing this that the manuscript paper really changed in value. You can see here how much lighter it got when it dried. That really surprised me. On the right there, you can see me adding some water, some drops of water to my carbazole violet and my green. And I'm getting this cartridge brush. It's a flat, about a 1/2 inch flat brush, and it holds, usually people put water in it and they paint with water in the cartridge. I'll show you in just a minute. I'm not going to be doing that. What I'm going to be doing is I'm mixing up some of this neutral, my carbazole violet with my green, and I'm about to fill the cartridge with this neutral color. So I'm getting enough of this mixed up so that I can open up the cartridge, and I'm trying to suck some of that paint up. It doesn't work so well, so I'm going to use a pipette here. I'm going to suck up some of that neutral color that I just mixed and put it into my brush cartridge. I guess we could call this another tool in my tool segment today, so you're getting a twofer. So this brush now has this neutral in the cartridge, and I can just paint around all of these leaves without dipping back into my paint. This is really handy. I'm going to use this again sometime. Mix up enough paint to put some in the cartridge. I really didn't put that much in, but I put enough in to get me started anyway. And actually, I was able to work around much of this without refueling, as it were. Now the painting on the left, there, I'm squeezing a little more paint into the brush there. The painting on the left, however, is not as saturated as the one on the right, because the one on the right has two glazes on it now of this neutral color. I'm squeezing a little bit as I paint, squeezing the pigment down into the brush. It really makes for a smooth painting job. I don't have to keep going back in and dipping into color. I did, however, pick up some darks there. I wanted a little bit more dark while the paper is still wet. So I apologize for the glare. I'm trying to let the camera see around the glare a little bit there. And you can see me build color. It's dried a little bit so that I can add more. I'm evening up the values, the tone a little bit. I don't want this to be where the eye goes. I want just the opposite of that. I want this dark, when it's dry, to just settle so that your eye, the viewer's eye, goes up to the flowers. So this effort is to knock down the importance of what's going on down at the bottom of the page. I'm letting some of those puddles of paint move around. And likewise the same here. I like the idea of allowing the paper and the watercolor to do its thing and not control it a lot. I decided that some of these middle sections of these flowers needed a little bit darker value. To my eye, they did. And I'm the artist. When you paint, you get to make these decisions. I like the value changes here. Just a few little tweaks. I like the fact that these darks in between those yellows really enrich the colors. So I want to encourage anyone watching this to keep pushing, keep trying. Don't feel like the first time that you lay down color is your entire painting. You can keep building and tweaking and adding and carving and even sometimes subtracting. This brush with the cartridge has the ability to, it's a stiff bristle, so I can lift with it and I can apply paint with it. And I'm looking around my painting to see if the stems need some additional enhancement. I'm putting a little texture on these buds. I'm rather liking these two pieces, and in conclusion, I have to say that I don't prefer the gesso, the clear gesso one on the left. I don't prefer working on the gesso over working with just the manuscript paper. Now these are dry and they're finished, and I probably won't be gessoing my manuscript paper because why bother? I'm perfectly happy with painting on the paper itself. I'll say goodbye for now. I hope you enjoyed painting on manuscript paper, something a little bit different. Next week, I want to show you how much fun we had when a whole group of artists got together and played with our art materials and painted flowers, lots and lots of flowers, zinnias, and sunflowers and all kinds of things. So tune in next week, and thank you for being with me.